My chemistry teacher accused me of faking seizures for attention while he was secretly drinking vodka during class. After he lost his license, he spent months stalking me and researching how to trigger epileptic episodes as revenge. My stupidity was my chemistry teacher, who was convinced that my life-threatening seizures were something I was doing for attention. I was in his class when I first had one. I was writing down an assignment when my eyes suddenly rolled back, my vision exploded, and I started twitching like that one streaming platform. That's all I remember. When I came to, I was on the floor with my lab partner Marcus kneeling beside me. Everyone had surrounded me and were really worried. But then Mr. Stupidity stormed over with his face bright red. He was one of those teachers who always wore wrinkled dress shirts and had permanent coffee stains on his tie. He glared down at me with pure contempt and said I needed to stop disrupting his class with my theatrical performances. I tried to explain that I couldn't control what happened, but he was already writing me up for disorderly conduct. The second time happened during a demonstration. I was watching him mix solutions when I felt a familiar tingling in my fingers that meant an episode was coming. I tried to warn Marcus, but my jaw locked up and I fell sideways off my stool. My arm swept across the lab table, sending pens and notebooks flying. Mr. Stupidity actually kicked a textbook across the room in frustration. He sent me to the principal's office with another write-up claiming I was intentionally disrupting instructional time. My dad had to leave work to pick me up and he was livid. Not at me, but at the school for treating a medical issue like a discipline problem. He'd been noticing me spacing out at home and having these weird moments where I'd stop mid-sentence and stare at nothing. We scheduled a neurologist appointment, but Mr. Stupides had already labeled me his problem student. He moved my seat to the back corner so I would cause less distraction when I decided to act out. The third incident was the worst. We were doing a lab with corrosive acids, and I was carefully measuring sodium hydroxide when I felt the aura hit, that strange smell of burning metal that always came before a bad episode. I tried to put the beaker down safely, but my whole body went rigid and I crashed to the floor. My knee hit the table leg on the way down and several bottles of chemicals wobbled dangerously. Marcus lunged forward to steady them while yelling for help. Mr. Stupidity completely exploded. He started screaming about how I was endangering everyone with my fake seizures and creating a hostile learning environment. While I was still twitching on the floor, unable to speak or move properly, he wrote out a 3-day suspension. He made me wait in the nurse's office until campus security could verify I wasn't on substances. The neurologist finally ran an EEG that week and discovered I had temporal lobe epilepsy. My brain was literally misfiring electrical signals causing partial and tonic-clonic seizures. No wonder I kept having seizures during stressful situations or when exposed to fluorescent lights. The doctor prescribed anticonvulsants and wrote a detailed letter explaining my condition and necessary accommodations. When I returned to school with my neurologist's documentation, Mr. Stupidity scoffed openly. He grabbed the papers and said, "How convenient that you suddenly have a medical excuse." He made air quotes around the word medical like I'd somehow faked an EEG. He told me I still had to serve the suspension and make up for all missed work, including redoing the lab I'd sabotaged. During my makeup lab session, I noticed Mr. Stupidity's acting strange. He kept going to his desk drawer and taking long drinks from what looked like a coffee thermos that he immediately locked away. His face was flushed and he kept stumbling over his words. He marked several correct answers wrong on my lab report and had to keep checking his notes. The room smelled weird too. Not like coffee, but something sharper. 3 weeks later, I was taking a test when I heard a massive crash from the front of the room. Mr. Stupidity had collapsed behind his demonstration table and knocked over an entire rack of test tubes. Glass shattered everywhere and chemicals started mixing on the floor, creating toxic fumes. His face was gray and he was barely breathing. Someone pulled the fire alarm while I called 911 from the wall phone. The paramedics found a flask of vodka that had rolled out of his desk drawer. Turns out Mr. Stupidity had been drinking throughout the day to deal with stress from grading and lesson plans. He'd been mixing vodka into his coffee thermos and was basically hammered every afternoon. Combined with the fumes from the spilled chemicals, his blood alcohol level caused respiratory failure. The investigation revealed he'd been intoxicated while teaching for months, which explained his erratic grading and violent outbursts. The school board revoked his teaching license, but that's all that happened. No charges were ever pressed, and Mr. Stupidity was now free, and somehow he thought I was the person to blame for everything. The first sign something was wrong came 3 weeks after Mr. Stupidity lost his license. I was walking home from school when I noticed a familiar figure sitting on the bus bench across from our house. My stomach dropped. There he was, wearing the same wrinkled dress shirt from his teaching days, just watching our front door. When he saw me looking, he stood up and walked away quickly, but not before I caught the expression on his face. Pure hatred. I told my parents about it that night over dinner. My mom frowned and suggested maybe he was just passing through the neighborhood. Dad was more concerned but figured it was a one-time thing. After all, what could he really do? The man had lost everything because of his own drinking problem. Surely he'd move on and rebuild his life somewhere else, but he didn't move on. The next week, I started getting weird phone calls. The caller ID showed different numbers each time, but nobody ever spoke when I answered, just breathing for a few seconds before hanging up. Then came the letters. Plain white envelopes with no return address started appearing in our mailbox. Inside were printouts of my social media posts with angry comments scrawled in red pen. Things like liar and you ruined my life written over photos of me with friends. My epilepsy medication was working well, and I hadn't had a seizure in over a month. The neurologist was pleased with my progress at my follow-up appointment. Life should have been getting back to normal. Instead, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, checking if that familiar figure was lurking somewhere nearby. The harassment escalated gradually. One morning, we found our garbage cans tipped over and trash scattered across the lawn. A few days later, someone had drawn crude symbols on our driveway with chalk. My dad installed a security camera, but whoever was doing it always stayed just out of view. We all knew it was Mr. Stupidity, but without proof, the police couldn't do anything. Then he started showing up places I went. I'd be at the grocery store with my mom and spot him one aisle over, pretending to shop while glaring at me. He'd be at the park when I went jogging, sitting on a bench with a newspaper he wasn't reading. Once, I saw him in the parking lot after my doctor's appointment, leaning against a car and watching me walk to ours. My parents tried talking to the police again. The officer took notes and said they'd increase patrols in our neighborhood, but explained that without direct threats or violence, their hands were tied. Following someone in public spaces wasn't technically illegal. The letters contained no explicit threats. Even if we could prove it was him, harassment charges were hard to pursue without more evidence. The stress started affecting my health. I began having minor focal seizures again, brief episodes where I'd lose awareness for a few seconds. My neurologist increased my medication dosage, concerned about the breakthrough seizures. She wrote another letter for the school, emphasizing that stress was a major trigger for my condition. Marcus noticed something was wrong before I told him. We'd stayed friends even though we didn't have chemistry class together anymore. He mentioned I seemed jumpy and asked if everything was okay. When I finally explained about Mr. Stupidity, his face went pale. Turns out Marcus had seen him too, hanging around the school parking lot after hours, watching students leave. My dad tried a different approach. He found out where Mr. Stupidity was living, a rundown apartment complex on the other side of town, and went to talk to him directly. Dad came home looking frustrated. Mr. Stupidity had answered the door reeking of alcohol and immediately started ranting about how I destroyed his career with my performance. He blamed me for the investigation that uncovered his drinking, insisted I'd planned the whole thing to get attention. Dad tried reasoning with him, explaining my medical condition was real and documented, but Mr. Stupidity just slammed the door in his face. The next day, things got worse. I came out of school to find my bike tires slashed. The security footage was conveniently corrupted for that time period. That evening, we got a call from our neighbor saying they'd seen someone in our backyard while we were at dinner. By the time we got home, nothing seemed disturbed, but the feeling of violation lingered. My mom wanted to look into a restraining order, but the lawyer she consulted wasn't optimistic. We'd need to prove a pattern of harassment and demonstrate reasonable fear of harm. The scattered incidents, while disturbing, might not meet the legal threshold. Plus, restraining orders were just pieces of paper. They only worked if the person chose to follow them. I started changing my routines, taking different routes to school, avoiding places I'd seen him before. My parents arranged for me to stay after school in the library until one of them could pick me up. The timing of Mr. Stupidity's collapse during that test seems pretty convenient, right when he's been treating a student with real seizures like a faker. Makes me wonder if the stress of his drinking problem was already eating at him while he was dismissing your medical condition. We installed more cameras, better locks, even a new alarm system, but the anxiety was constant. Every unexpected unexpected noise made me jump. Every unknown car driving slowly past our house sent my heart racing. The anxiety became my constant companion over the following weeks. I developed a habit of checking every window before bed, making sure the curtains were drawn tight. My parents noticed me jumping at shadows and insisted on driving me everywhere, but even their presence couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. One afternoon, I was studying in my room when I heard our doorbell ring repeatedly. My mom answered it to find a delivery person with a large package addressed to me. She signed for it, confused since we hadn't ordered anything. Inside was a chemistry textbook, the same one from Mr. Stupidy's class, with pages torn out and angry red marks covering every mention of safety procedures. A note tucked inside read, "You think you're so smart," in familiar handwriting. Dad immediately drove to the police station with a package. The officer on duty examined it carefully and agreed it seemed threatening, but explained they'd need more evidence to pursue charges. They suggested we document everything and build a case file. Meanwhile, Mr. Stupidi remained free to continue his campaign. The following week brought a new development. I arrived at school to find several classmates giving me strange looks. Marcus pulled me aside and showed me a social media account that had appeared overnight. Someone using a fake profile was posting edited photos of me with captions claiming I faked my seizures for attention. The account had messaged dozens of students with elaborate lies about how I'd manipulated teachers and administrators. My parents contacted the school administration, who promised to investigate. The IT department traced the account to a public library computer, but security footage from that day was mysteriously missing. Students who didn't know me well started avoiding me in the hallways. Even some teachers seemed unsure what to believe. Marcus stood by me, actively defending me to anyone who'd listen. He helped report the fake account and gathered screenshots as evidence. His loyalty meant everything during those isolating days, but the damage to my reputation was spreading faster than we could contain it. Then Mr. Stupidi escalated his tactics. I was walking to the library after school when I noticed him following me, staying about 50 feet behind but matching my pace exactly. I quickened my steps and ducked into a busy store, watching through the window as he lingered outside. My hands shook as I called my dad, who arrived within minutes. We saw Mr. Stupidy's car pulling away just as Dad parked. That night, our home phone rang at 2 a.m. Dad answered groggily, then his face hardened. He hung up without speaking and told us it was just heavy breathing. The calls continued every few hours throughout the night. We unplugged the phone, but the damage was done. None of us slept well after that. My seizure activity increased with the stress. During a particularly bad episode in English class, I fell from my chair and hit my head on a desk. The school nurse called an ambulance as a precaution. While waiting in the emergency room for test results, I spotted a familiar figure in the waiting area. Mr. Stupidi sat 3 rows away, pretending to read a magazine while watching me. Hospital security escorted him out when Dad complained, but he was back in the parking lot when we left. The neurologist adjusted my medication again and strongly recommended stress reduction techniques. She offered to write another letter documenting how harassment was affecting my medical condition. My parents started discussing more drastic measures, like moving to a different neighborhood or switching schools. But running felt like letting him win. I'd done nothing wrong, yet I was the one living in fear. The injustice burned inside me, competing with a constant anxiety. I started keeping a detailed journal of every incident, every sighting, every strange occurrence. If the police needed evidence, I'd give them evidence. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked on our door one evening with her own security camera footage. She'd noticed someone lurking around our property and had adjusted her cameras to capture better angles. The footage clearly showed Mr. Stupidi attempting to pick our back gate lock at 3 a.m. His face was perfectly visible in her high-definition system. Armed with this evidence, Dad returned to the police station. This time, they took it seriously. Breaking and entering, even attempted, was a crime they could pursue. An officer came to take our statements and collect all our documentation. They promised to pick up Mr. Stupidi for questioning, but when officers arrived at his apartment, he was gone. The landlord said he'd packed up and left 2 days earlier, owing 3 months of back rent. His forwarding address was fake. The police issued a warrant but warned us he could be anywhere. The not knowing was worse than seeing him around town. At least before, we had some idea where he was. Now every stranger could be him in disguise. Every unexpected sound at night sent my adrenaline spiking. I started having panic attacks that mimicked seizure warnings, making it hard to distinguish real medical episodes from anxiety. My parents installed motion sensor lights around our property and upgraded to a more sophisticated alarm system. Dad took time off work to be home more often. Mom started carrying pepper spray. We all attended a family safety workshop at the community center, learning basic self-defense and situational awareness. 2 weeks passed without incident. I began to hope he'd finally given up and moved away. Then Marcus texted me urgently during lunch. He'd overheard 2 students talking about a substitute teacher asking strange questions about me. The sub had claimed to be doing research on students with medical conditions, but focused entirely on my seizure history and daily schedule. The school investigated and discovered the substitute had used fake credentials. Security footage showed a man matching Mr. Stupidy's description wearing a wig and different clothes. He'd spent half a day on campus, accessing student records and observing my classes from afar. The breach sent shockwaves through the administration. An emergency assembly addressed the security failure. Parents demanded answers. The school implemented new verification procedures for all staff and visitors. My name was kept out of official communications, but rumors spread quickly. Some students blamed me for the new restrictive policies. Others whispered that I must have done something terrible to make a teacher hate me so much. The isolation was crushing. Beyond Marcus and a few close friends, I felt like a pariah. Teachers treated me with kid gloves, constantly checking if I was okay. Classmates either avoided me or stared with morbid curiosity. The fake social media accounts kept popping up faster than we could report them. My grades started slipping. Concentration became impossible when I was constantly scanning for threats. During a history presentation, I froze mid-sentence, not from a seizure but from spotting someone through the classroom window who looked like Mr. Stupidi. It turned out to be a maintenance worker, but the damage was done. Whispers followed me down the hallway. Then came the letters to my parents' workplaces. Dad's boss called him in after receiving an anonymous package full of printed emails claiming Dad was unstable and dangerous. Mom's office got similar material suggesting she was neglecting her child's mental health issues. Both packages included twisted versions of my medical history, mixing real facts with vicious lies. Fortunately, both employers knew my parents well enough to recognize the harassment. They increased security and alerted their staff to report suspicious contacts. But the stress was wearing on everyone. Dad developed insomnia, Mom started getting migraines, family dinners became strategy sessions for dealing with the latest incident. I felt responsible for bringing this chaos into our lives. The guilt competed with anger at the unfairness of it all. My therapist, recommended by the neurologist, helped me process these feelings. She taught me coping strategies and reminded me that Mr. Stupidy's actions were his choice, not my fault. One evening, while reviewing our security footage, we noticed something odd. Our recycling bin had been moved slightly, and the lid wasn't fully closed. Dad went to investigate and found a small device attached to the bottom. The police identified it as a GPS tracker, the kind available at any electronics store. Mr. Stupidi had been monitoring our movements. The sweep of our vehicles revealed 2 more trackers. The violation felt profound. Every family outing, every doctor's appointment, every trip to the grocery store, he'd potentially been watching. The police added stalking charges to his growing list of offenses, but he remained at large. I started noticing patterns in his behavior. He seemed to know when Dad would be at work or when Mom had evening meetings. He appeared at places I'd only decided to visit last minute. We realized he might have access to more than just GPS trackers. A professional security consultant found evidence of compromised home network security and possibly cloned cell phones. The consultant helped us secure our digital lives. New passwords, encrypted communications, and regular security sweeps became routine. The cost was significant, but my parents considered it necessary. We were essentially living in a fortress, both physical and digital. Marcus proved invaluable during this time. He started accompanying me between classes and organizing group study sessions so I'd never be alone. His girlfriend Bert joined our support network, using her social media influence to counter the fake accounts spreading lies about me. I'm really curious about how Mr. Stupidi managed to get GPS trackers on their stuff without anyone noticing. How long was he tracking them before they found those devices? Their friendship kept me grounded when everything else felt unstable. The police finally got a lead when Mr. Stupidi used a credit card at a gas station 2 towns over. Security footage confirmed his identity. He drastically changed his appearance, losing weight and growing a beard, but his distinctive walk gave him away. Officers staked out nearby motels and found him registered under an alias, but somehow he evaded capture. When police arrived at his motel room, they found evidence he'd been living there for weeks. Maps of our neighborhood covered one wall. Printed photos of me, my family, and our house were scattered across the bed. Notebooks full of rambling grievances detailed his plans for revenge. The officers said it was one of the most disturbing scenes they'd encountered. Among his possessions, they found something that chilled me to the bone. He'd been studying my medical history, researching epilepsy triggers, and making notes about inducing seizures. There were chemistry formulas for creating specific light patterns and sound frequencies known to trigger episodes in photosensitive epileptics. He'd been planning to weaponize my condition against me. The near miss with police seemed to enrage him further. The harassment intensified dramatically. Dead animals appeared on our doorstep. Our car tires were slashed repeatedly despite security cameras. Threatening messages were spray painted on our garage door. Each incident was carefully planned to avoid leaving evidence that could definitively identify him. School became unbearable. Someone kept pulling fire alarms during my classes, forcing evacuations that left me vulnerable in crowds. My locker was vandalized with medical symbols and the word faker in permanent marker. Anonymous notes appeared in my backpack with detailed threats about what would happen if I didn't confess to ruining his life. The administration offered homeschooling as a temporary solution. Accepting felt like surrender, but my parents insisted on prioritizing my safety. A retired teacher named Victoria came to our house 3 times a week. She was patient and understanding, helping me keep up with coursework despite the chaos. Isolation from school meant losing daily contact with friends. Marcus visited when he could, but it wasn't the same. I watched through social media as life continued without me. School events, parties, and normal teenage experiences became distant dreams. Mr. Stupidity had effectively imprisoned me in my own home. Then he made a mistake. In his arrogance, he sent a package directly to the police station, demanding they arrest me for destroying his life. The rambling manifesto included specific details only he could know about classroom incidents. Forensic analysis found his fingerprints and DNA on the package. The evidence was finally ironclad. A manhunt began in earnest. His photo appeared on local news. Police visited every motel, shelter, and camping ground within 50 miles. Known associates were questioned. His ex-wife, contacted by investigators, revealed he'd been calling her with increasingly unhinged rants about me. She'd recorded several calls at her lawyer's advice. The pressure drove him to desperation. One night, motion sensors woke us at 3 a.m. Security cameras showed him in our backyard, pouring something on the ground. Dad called 911 while Mom got me to the safe room we'd installed. Police arrived within minutes, but he'd vanished into the darkness. Hazmat teams identified the substance as industrial chemicals that, when mixed, would create toxic fumes. We evacuated to a hotel while our house was cleaned and aired out. The realization hit hard. He'd escalated to attempted poisoning. If we'd gone outside to investigate, if our windows had been open, the consequences could have been fatal. The police increased their search intensity, now treating him as extremely dangerous. Living in the hotel felt surreal. We maintained routines as best we could, but nothing was normal. I continued online schooling from a laptop. My parents worked remotely when possible. We ate takeout meals in a cramped room, jumping at every knock on the door. The hotel staff, aware of our situation, provided extra security. Marcus and his family offered their guest room, but we couldn't risk bringing danger to their doorstep. Other friends made similar offers. The community support was touching, even as we felt increasingly isolated. Cards and messages arrived at the police station for us, since we couldn't receive mail directly. My medication needed adjustment again. The constant stress was overriding the anticonvulsant's effectiveness. Brief seizures broke through at unpredictable moments. The neurologist prescribed additional medications and recommended intensive therapy. She documented everything for potential future legal proceedings. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke to use the bathroom and noticed an odd smell. Not the burning metal of an impending seizure, but something chemical. Through the hotel window, I saw smoke rising from the parking lot. Our car was on fire. Dad grabbed the fire extinguisher while Mom called 911. Security footage later showed Mr. Stupidity dousing our vehicle with accelerant, but this time he hadn't escaped cleanly. A hotel guest, returning late from work, had seen him and followed at a distance. The witness, a former military officer named Daniel, provided detailed descriptions of his vehicle and direction of travel. Police found the car abandoned miles away, but search dogs picked up his trail. The hunt led to an abandoned warehouse district. Officers surrounded the building where the dogs indicated his presence. Through a bullhorn, they ordered him to surrender. The standoff lasted hours. We waited at the police station, exhausted but unable to sleep. Finally, word came that they'd apprehended him after he tried to escape through a loading dock. Seeing him in custody felt surreal. Through one-way glass at the station, I watched as he was processed. He looked haggard, his clothes filthy, his eyes wild. When detectives questioned him, he launched into rambling accusations about me. He insisted I'd orchestrated everything, that I'd somehow planned for him to become an alcoholic and lose his career. His disconnect from reality was complete. The charges were extensive: stalking, harassment, attempted poisoning, arson, breaking and entering, making terroristic threats, and more. The prosecutor assured us he'd face serious prison time, but until trial, we remained vigilant. Even behind bars, his obsession with me hadn't dimmed. He sent letters to other inmates, trying to recruit them to continue his campaign. We slowly began rebuilding our lives. The house needed extensive security upgrades and psychological cleansing. Every room held memories of fear. Professional cleaners removed all traces of his vandalism. A therapist specializing in stalking victims helped us reclaim our space. Gradually, home started feeling safe again. Returning to school proved challenging. The administration implemented new safety protocols specifically for me. Security officers knew my face and schedule. Teachers were briefed on emergency procedures. Some students welcomed me back warmly, while others kept their distance. The whispers and stares eventually faded as newer dramas captured attention. My seizures gradually came back under control as stress levels decreased. The neurologist was pleased with my progress, so she maintained higher medication doses as a precaution. Regular therapy sessions helped process the trauma. Support groups for stalking victims provided community with people who understood. Marcus remained my closest ally throughout recovery. He never treated me differently, never made me feel like a victim. His friendship anchored me during the hardest moments. When I finally felt ready to attend social events again, he was right there beside me, a protective presence without being overbearing. The trial date approached with mixed emotions. Part of me dreaded reliving everything in court. Another part needed the closure that justice might bring. The prosecutor prepared us thoroughly, explaining what to expect and practicing testimony. They built an overwhelming case with our documentation, evidence, and witness statements. But 2 weeks before trial, Mr. Stupidy's lawyer contacted ours. He wanted to negotiate a plea deal. The evidence against him was insurmountable. Rather than face maximum sentences, he offered to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence. The prosecutor recommended accepting, sparing us the trauma of trial while ensuring significant prison time. My family gathered in the prosecutor's office to discuss the plea deal. The terms seemed reasonable: 15 years minimum before parole eligibility, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and a permanent restraining order. Dad studied the paperwork while Mom gripped my hand. The prosecutor explained that accepting meant avoiding a trial where I'd have to testify and relive everything. After an hour of discussion, we agreed to the deal. 3 days later, I received a letter forwarded from the jail. Mr. Stupidity had written me directly, pages of rambling accusations mixed with veiled threats about what would happen when he got out. The prosecutor immediately filed additional charges for witness intimidation. The letter violated his pretrial conditions and would add years to his sentence. Marcus drove me to my first day back at regular school. The administration had arranged for me to return gradually, starting with half days. Walking through those doors felt monumental. Some students stared, others deliberately looked away. My locker had been replaced, the vandalism erased. Teachers greeted me warmly but carefully, like I might shatter. During lunch, I sat with Marcus and Bert at our usual table. Other students gradually joined us, the awkwardness fading as conversation turned to normal topics. Really interesting how Mr. Stupidity bothered studying epilepsy triggers and light frequencies when he's clearly having his own mental breakdown. The motel wall covered in maps and photos suggests someone spending way too much time alone with their thoughts. I wonder what made him snap this badly over losing his teaching job. Someone mentioned the spring science fair, and I realized how much I'd missed. The normalcy felt foreign but welcome. When the bell rang, I noticed my hands weren't shaking anymore. That evening, Mom showed me something concerning. She'd been monitoring local classified ads and found one that made her blood run cold. Someone was seeking a chemistry tutor for special project involving light frequencies and medical conditions. The wording matched Mr. Stupidy's research notes exactly. We contacted the prosecutor immediately. The investigation revealed Mr. Stupity had been using the jail phone system to contact former students, trying to recruit them for his vendetta. He'd offered commissary money to anyone who would place ads or gather information about me. 2 inmates reported his attempts to trade favors for help targeting me after his release. The prosecutor added conspiracy charges and moved to revoke his phone privileges. During the hearing, Mr. Stupity erupted in court, screaming that I was controlling everyone, that the judge was part of my conspiracy. Security officers had to physically remove him. His own lawyer looked defeated. A week before the plea hearing, something unexpected happened. Victoria, my homeschool teacher, called with news. She'd been contacted by someone claiming to be writing a book about teacher-student conflicts. The person asked detailed questions about my medical condition and daily routines. Victoria, suspicious, had recorded the call and traced the number to a payphone near the jail. Further investigation uncovered a disturbing network. Mr. Stupity had convinced his cellmate, due for release, to continue his harassment campaign. The cellmate had been visiting the library, researching my family, and planning to pick up where Mr. Stupity left off. Police arrested him for conspiracy and stalking before he could act. The plea hearing arrived on a gray Thursday morning. I sat between my parents in the courtroom, watching Mr. Stupity enter in shackles. He'd lost more weight, his hair unkempt, his eyes darting wildly around the room until they locked on me. The hatred there hadn't dimmed. If anything, it had intensified. The judge reviewed the charges methodically. Stalking, harassment, attempted poisoning, arson, witness intimidation, conspiracy. The list seemed endless. When asked to confirm his plea, Mr. Stupity hesitated. For a moment, I thought he might reject the deal and force a trial. Then his lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, and he grudgingly agreed. Before sentencing, the judge allowed victim impact statements. Dad spoke first, describing how our family had lived in fear, the financial burden of security measures, the emotional toll. Mom followed, her voice breaking as she detailed watching her child suffer from stress-induced seizures. Their words painted a picture of lives derailed by one man's obsession. When my turn came, I'd prepared remarks about forgiveness and moving forward. But standing there, facing him, different words emerged. I described every seizure his harassment had triggered, every moment of isolation, every night spent afraid. I explained how his actions had weaponized my medical condition against me. The courtroom was silent except for my voice. Mr. Stupity tried to interrupt several times, but the judge silenced him. When I finished, he exploded. He launched into a tirade about how I'd orchestrated everything, how I'd ruined his life deliberately. He claimed I'd faked my seizures to destroy him, that the EEG results were fabricated, that everyone was lying. The judge had to threaten contempt charges to quiet him. The sentence came down hard. 20 years with possibility of parole after 15, mandatory psychiatric treatment, permanent restraining order, and restitution for our security expenses. Mr. Stupity screamed as they led him away, promising he'd never stop, that I'd pay for destroying him. His voice echoed through the courthouse halls until the doors closed. Outside the courthouse, relief washed over me in waves. Dad hugged me tight while Mom wiped away tears. The prosecutor shook our hands, assuring us the system would monitor Mr. Stupity closely. Any attempts to contact us would add years to his sentence. We'd finally achieve justice through proper channels. But the story wasn't quite over. 2 weeks later, I received a call from the prison psychiatrist. She'd been assigned to evaluate Mr. Stupity and wanted background information. During our conversation, she revealed something chilling. He'd been creating detailed drawings of our house, my school, places I frequented. He'd memorized my schedule from months of stalking and could recite it perfectly. The psychiatrist diagnosed him with severe delusional disorder and obsessive fixation. She recommended maximum security placement and intensive treatment. Her report would ensure he couldn't manipulate the system for early release. She also warned us to remain vigilant, as his fixation showed no signs of diminishing despite incarceration. Marcus helped me process everything over pizza that weekend. He'd been researching stalking cases and found that many perpetrators eventually moved on to new targets. But Mr. Stupity's fixation seemed different, more intense. We agreed to maintain security precautions indefinitely. Better safe than sorry. The following month brought a surprise. Several of Mr. Stupity's former students reached out through the school counselor. They'd experienced his erratic behavior and wanted to support me. One girl revealed he'd given her failing grades after she'd refused to stay after school for extra help. Another described uncomfortable comments about her appearance. Their stories painted a pattern of inappropriate behavior that predated his drinking problem. These students testified at a school board hearing about teacher oversight. The board implemented new policies for reporting concerning behavior and mandatory substance abuse screening. While I hadn't sought systemic change, our case had exposed serious gaps in student protection. The reforms would help future students avoid similar situations. My seizures finally stabilized on the adjusted medication regime. The neurologist was pleased with my progress, noting that removing the chronic stress had significantly improved my condition. She reduced my dosages gradually, monitoring for breakthrough episodes. For the first time in months, I felt like my body was truly mine again. Summer arrived with its promise of new beginnings. I got a part-time job at a local bookstore, eager to earn money and regain independence. The owner, aware of my situation, ensured I always worked with others present. Customers occasionally recognized me from news coverage of the sentencing, but most treated me normally. One afternoon, while shelving books, I noticed a familiar-looking man browsing the chemistry section. My heart raced until I realized it was just a college student shopping for textbooks. The paranoia would take time to fade. Every stranger who looked too long, every unexpected noise, still triggered alertness. But each false alarm proved Mr. Stupity was truly locked away. Dad surprised us by signing up for self-defense classes as a family. Every Saturday morning, we learned practical techniques from an instructor who specialized in personal safety. The physical activity helped channel our residual anxiety into something productive. Mom discovered she had a talent for defensive moves, making us all laugh during practice. The one-year anniversary of Mr. Stupity's arrest approached with mixed emotions. We'd survived and thrived despite his campaign of terror. I was back in school, maintaining good grades, and had even joined the debate team. My seizures were controlled. Our home felt safe again, but we knew he was still there, serving his sentence, possibly still obsessing. Then came an unexpected letter from the prison. Not from Mr. Stupity, but from the warden. He wanted us to know that Mr. Stupity had been placed in solitary confinement after attempting to recruit other inmates to contact me. They'd found notebooks filled with plans for revenge after his release. The warden assured us these would be used to deny any future parole requests. The letter should have been reassuring, but it reminded me that Mr. Stupity's obsession hadn't faded. Behind bars, he was still plotting, still blaming me for his downfall. The psychiatrist had been right about his fixation being unusual in its intensity. Even imprisonment hadn't broken his delusion that I'd orchestrated his destruction. Marcus and Bert invited me to their graduation party. Standing in their backyard, surrounded by friends and laughter, I felt almost normal. The hypervigilance had faded to background awareness. I could enjoy moments without constantly scanning for threats. When someone mentioned chemistry class, I didn't flinch anymore. As senior year approached, I made a decision. Instead of hiding from my experience, I'd use it to help others. I volunteered with a local victim advocacy group, sharing my story with those facing similar situations. The coordinator trained me to provide support while maintaining healthy boundaries. Helping others helped me heal. During one session, a young woman described her ex-boyfriend's escalating harassment. Her story echoed mine in disturbing ways. I shared practical strategies that had worked for us: documentation, security measures, legal remedies. Watching her gain confidence and take action reminded me how far I'd come from that terrified student. The final communication came through official channels. Mr. Stupity had requested to enter a rehabilitation program that might reduce his sentence. Part of the process required him to acknowledge his crimes and their impact. The prosecutor forwarded his written statement, warning it might be disturbing. I read it once, then burned it. He'd written 20 pages of justification, blaming me for every misfortune in his life. He claimed I'd hypnotized the other students, bribed the school board, and faked evidence. The delusions had deepened. The rehabilitation board rejected his application, noting his complete lack of accountability or remorse. That night, I sat with my parents watching a movie, our new security system quietly monitoring the perimeter. We'd found our new normal. The fear had faded to cautious self-awareness. Mr. Stupidity was serving his time, unable to hurt us. I'd graduated, started college applications, and rebuilt my life. He'd tried to destroy me, but I'd survived and grown stronger. The epilepsy that he'd tried to weaponize was now well controlled. I'd learned to advocate for myself medically and personally. The experience had taught me resilience I never knew I possessed. As I prepared for the future, I carried those lessons with me. Mr. Stupidity had wanted me to live in fear forever. Instead, I chose to live fully, aware but unafraid. My life was mine again, and I intended to make the most of it. Thanks for letting me share my questions and thoughts with you all. Until next time.